Hi, this is Mike Schmitz, and welcome to another edition of Screencasts Online. In this week's episode, we're going to take a look at automation options on iOS. This episode specifically will dive into the three types of automation that are available on iOS, and we'll explain how you might want to use each, as well as give several examples so you can understand what types of actions you can automate with each approach. We'll start by explaining how apps on iOS talk to each other and teach you some basic principles of iOS automation so you understand how all the building blocks work together. We'll introduce you to some applications that you can use to implement automation on your iOS device, like Drafts, Launch Center Pro, and Workflow. We won't cover all the features of these applications, but we'll explain how to use them from an automation perspective and explain some of the strengths and weaknesses of each so you know which tool is right for the job that you're trying to automate. In the next installment in this iOS automation series, we'll show you some more complex workflows that really tie things together and explain in detail how you can chain these different applications together. But for this episode, we want to make sure that you can understand the basic principles so that you can start creating your own automations on iOS. So let's dive in and let's take a look at automation on iOS devices.